Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and video games are disappearing. You might have heard of 87% missing, the disappearance of classic video games. For the first time ever, there was actually a study and a report done that showcased 87% of video games on average from the classic era are actually just disappeared from shelves. They're gone. They're unable to be purchased. The only way you're getting them is through Jim Bob and their yard sale if you're lucky. Now, to be real with you, initially when I saw this headline floating around, I was like, whoa, is it that bad? And the reality is, yeah, when it comes to actually purchasing these classic video games, at least the ones that were released in the United States. This isn't factoring for the rest of the world, because that's a far bigger assessment. But only 13% of video game history is actually represented in the current marketplace today. So what this effectively means is when you're going out to purchase a video game and trying to keep those classics alive, it's not really possible. For instance, video games beyond 1985, just before that, have an alarmingly low amount of preservation available. And that's simply due to the fact that video games are truly a dying breed when it comes to actually preserving video games. I've always said this when it comes to movies. You know, things released on DVD, film, VHS, Betamax. Usually most movies, in fact, I would be hard-pressed to find a movie that isn't, released, actually has a digitized video file available. These are backed up to streaming services, to the Internet Archive, to plenty of locations. Books, for instance, while they once were, pieces of, words written on actual printed paper, a lot of those books have been digitized and uploaded as small PDF files on numerous services and, of course, the Internet Archive. But video games are a different breed. It's not like movies, it's not like music, it's not like books. Video games contain tons of proprietary secrets, especially in their source code, and of course, video game preservation is also threatened by the companies that produce this. I'm looking at you, Nintendo. I'm looking at every company out there. The video game industry hates the ideas of ROM sites archiving ROMs from back in the early 2000s, all the way even to the 90s. Now, you might be wondering, why would Nintendo go after a ROM site that's releasing Super Mario Bros. On the Super Nintendo, a game they don't even actually sell anymore? Well, twofold. A, they do sell the game again through a subscription streaming service, a subscription emulation service on the Switch. The other reality is because it's Nintendo, and by copyright law, technically, it's their property. And if they want to remove it, well, it's their right. Now, I personally disagree with that because I think games that are actually that old should kind of be thrown out of the copyright-like umbrella and be allowed to preserve by everyone around them. But the other issue with video game preservation is that you need an emulator if you're going to preserve specific systems. You know, the PlayStation 4 emulation scene is just starting to blossom, but until the actual emulators come, the games are tied exclusively to that actual hardware. So when that hardware dies, and it will die, those games may be lost forever at a time. It's one of the games like Metal Gear Solid 4 recently that I've been playing again on an emulator. If all the PS3s in the world go away, which is a possibility, hardware dies. One of the clear-cut examples of this is literally games like Gears of War 2. For instance, you can buy Gears of War 1 through the Microsoft Store, the remake. You can buy the original Gears of War on like the original PC release if you can still find a disc. You could buy Gears of War 4 and 5 on the PC, but if you wanted to play 2, 3 Judgment, well, thank God to emulators so you can actually play through the entire franchise, at least on PC. So Gears of War 2 is perfectly preserved outside of the commercial interests of these companies. And, you can run these up to 60 frames. You can jack up the resolution. You can remaster the game yourself if that's what you wanted to do. And again, this is one of the reasons why preservation is so important. Without actually preserving the hardware, games like Gears of War 2, one of the best, I would say, shooters of all time, would be lost, again, to time if we just didn't bother emulating or preserving it. That's the danger we live with when it comes to preserving the art we call video games. It might seem doom and gloom, but generally it is talking about an actual ecosystem, an actual marketplace, for instance, like the availability of Game Boy games, for instance, right? Shockingly low availability for the entire Game Boy family. From their study, the Game Boy family of Game Boy games are in release, around 5.87% of them. In fact, this number went so low because of the shutdown of the Nintendo 3DS and the Wii U Virtual Console storefronts, which for the longest times was the cheapest, most efficient way for people to buy old-ass Game Boy games. Now, you gotta rely on ROMs and emulation, because that's how the community keeps things alive. Now, I'm gonna touch upon piracy as well too, but I'll leave that just for a little bit later. You've also got other systems like the PlayStation 2, for instance. From their sample of PS2 titles published in the United States, 12% of PlayStation 2 games are actually in release. So their study shows that most historical games are no longer in release compared to studies of other creative mediums. The availability rate of pre-2010 video games, which by the way isn't that long ago, is similar to the commercial availability of World War II, pre-World War II audio recordings. So around 10% or less. Video games, 13%. Do you know how wild that sounds? Video games were made well past World War II, and the fact that they have a preservation rate of media that happened before World War II is insanity to me. But it all comes from the actual, points that I've raised just shortly before talking about this. Now, we can always laugh at the video game market too. One of the funniest things that I've seen, actually saddest, but kind of funny to me in a dark way, was this actual shot from a video game shelf. Now, these are Canadian prices from what I understand, but this is still pricey, okay? So, for instance, this is Persona 2 on the PlayStation. You ever played Persona 2? You ever played Persona Revelations? Yeah, these are games before you could actually date whoever you wanted and have an entire social links. $600, but you get a pre-owned game with the manual. Oh, Muda, but what if you wanted to save money? $400. That is without the actual manual, ladies and gentlemen. So why are the prices like this? Well, I'll be real with you. It's because the economic system we live in pretty much allows somebody to look at the supply of the games, meaning that the actual supply is very low. So generally, retro video games like this are priced to the high heavens because there is somebody willing to pay this price. Is it an intelligent price to pay? No, it's not. Fucking hell no. $600 for a PlayStation game? If I caught anybody in my family spending that much money on a goddamn video game, I'd slap the hell out of them. Just emulate it at that point. Jesus Christ. Why are you ever maxing out your credit cards for this nonsense? Now, of course, you might be like, but what if I wanted to play it on the original hardware? Then mod the original hardware, okay? Because a pre-owned game gives nothing back to Atlas, okay? Guess what? This is Jim Bob at Jim Bob's store, the flea market, the crack den, making the money, all right? This doesn't benefit the gaming industry, period. This is literally the third-party reseller market. Now, video games are also in a pretty scary state because the video game consoles we have are also dying. For instance, sometimes they can even be really terrible consoles, like the Gizmondo. Do you ever know what the Gizmondo looks like? This, my friends, is the Gizmondo. This weird taco shell looking thing, that's an actual gaming console. And the story behind this is massive indeed. It involves Ferraris and a lot of mismanaged money, but that's a story for a different time. To play the Gizmondo, I'd need to pay almost $560 Canadian, all right, plus $75 shipping because hell, why not? In order to get a new battery, a memory card, actually that's not a bad price if you're getting all the games for a Gizmondo. Actually, I'm kidding, the Gizmondo sucks, but if you ever wanted to play some classic games like Colors, then you would need to go out of your way to pay an excessive amount for this game. You remember what Colors was? Yeah, back when GTA San Andreas was the most popular thing imaginable, every game tried to capitalize on its success. This game looks like dog cheeks, because it is dog cheeks, because it is the dog's cum. Ladies and gentlemen, this game is terrible. But if you ever wanted to play it for preservation's sake, your only hope is an emulator project that had its last update in January of 2022. So yeah, again, without emulation, without ROM because the ROMs here are actually preserved for this console, but without any emulation, and this hardware slowly dying off, and by the way, the company behind the hardware, as you can imagine, is defunct, this whole entire generation of gaming history may be lost to time immemorial. It might be gone forever. And it gets even worse when you think about, just the digital world we live in. Now, if you own a modern-day smartphone, I know some of you do, you might be watching your video on your iPhone. Then you'd realize that the digital marketplace for an iPhone is probably the biggest example of when preservation and the lack of it bites you on the ass. Way back in the day of early iPhone gaming, before the days of battle passes and constant ads in your mobile games, I'm looking at you, every Candy Crush clone out there. There used to actually be some pretty cool, iPhone games. I grew up on certain iPhone games. Games like Metal Gear Solid Touch, okay? You wanted to play a shooting gallery, Metal Gear Solid 4 style? That was an option. You ever remember a game franchise known as Infinity Blade? Yeah, this is actually a time when game developers wanted to really make console quality games on a phone. This is the first commercial game, from what I understand, that used Unreal Engine 3 at the time on a cell phone. It's nothing more than whack-a-mole Punch-Out, but it was an interesting showcase as to where mobile gaming was headed back in the day. Well, because of, how iPhone handles its software, because of the fact that they restricted 64-bit applications only on modern-day smartphones, and of course, because the game developer, Epic, or Chair in this case, shut up Siri, decided not to actually go out of their way to preserve and update this game, it was lost to time forever. Infinity Blade 1, Infinity Blade 2, Infinity Blade 3, all of them gone. There used to be a point when BioShock was playable on a cell phone, all the way from start to end. Want to know what happened to that? Gone. 2K didn't update the game to make sure it ran compatibly with modern-day smartphones, modern-day iPhones, and that whole era of mobile gaming slowly withered away. So yes, preservation and the lack of it sucks. It's not just the retro game market that's dying off, it's the modern-day market too. Even actual modern-day games, good games, like the Chronicles of Riddick, Assault on Dark Athena. You ever played this game? One of the best games ever, okay? One of my favorite immersive, almost like a stealth shooter games. Completely unavailable. You know why? Because Vin Diesel's gaming company doesn't exist anymore. And the only way to go purchase this is to go on Amazon, try to find a PS3 copy for $32, buy an Xbox 360 copy, or you can try to purchase the PC version. Actually, no, you can't, because the PC disc doesn't exist. No, currently the item is available only to customers located in the United States. What about Russian Riddick fans, huh? What are they gonna do? There used to be other platforms like GOG, which used to actually host the game. Unfortunately, it's completely gone. But thank God to Piracy, and yes, I'm going to thank God to Piracy, and I'm going to preface that by saying piracy is illegal. It is. It really is. Piracy is wrong. Should you download a brand new game that just came out? No, it's against the law. You wouldn't download a car. You wouldn't download a handbag, okay? You wouldn't download anything. I mean, honestly, I'd download a car if I could. That sounds like a pretty cool thing to do. But point is, piracy is wrong and illegal. But because of piracy, that Chronicles of Riddick game is actually preserved. Meaning if people wanted to play this game, they can buy it download and play it right now. Because buying and giving money to Vin Diesel isn't a possibility. You want to give money to Vin Diesel, you watch the new Fast and the Furious movies, all right? Because that's the only way I can support this guy. And you know what's sad? Vin Diesel actually does have some interesting video games. He's actually a video game nut. He likes games, Beyond just the crappy Fast and the Furious games, you wanted to play a shitty, open world type, play Wheelman. It's actually an interesting Vin Diesel game. I'm not even kidding with you. The fact that these games are lost to time forever is just sad. But the other thing is, it's not just the actual classic games. Even Flash games are dying too. So literally a couple days ago, I found this group called the Flashpoint Archive. Basically, they allow you to download 1.48 terabytes. Nearly every of your classic Flash games are preserved here. You want to go through a nostalgia bomb right now? Wait a minute. Snowball Fight 3D. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, you remember a site known as Miniclips, Bonus.com, Newgrounds, Cool Math Games? Yeah, a lot of those Flash games are actually preserved because of projects like this. You wanted to play some of these old Miniclip games? You can. Hey, back in the days of Shockwave.com, I remember that when I was growing up, you can play Redline Rumble. Doesn't look as good as I remember, but hell, you can play it. You want to play Leapin' Larry? You can. Classic Shockwave title. Thing Stick RPG. Yeah, these are all available. Now, there's a whole different video to the ideas of how modern Flash games or Flash games in the Web 1.0 era are slowly being lost to time as well, but that's again a different video too. I wanted to look into it because, yes, it really is a shame that most classic video games are unavailable from the market, and it seems like the only ways for us to keep them preserved are through pirated methods, cracking video games, making sure they sit on ROM sites forever. Now, I'm one of those people that believes that video games should be preserved because there was a period of my life where I didn't have the kinds of money to go out and buy a new video game. Most of my gaming for the longest period of time was through emulation. I used to play a lot of classic PlayStation 1 RPGs through an emulator. Heck, most of my Final Fantasy experience, which is one of my favorite game franchises, was done entirely through emulation. I played all the way through Final Fantasy 1 to 9 through emulators. It wasn't until Final Fantasy 10 that even then, years down the road, I actually ended up playing it again when it was re-released on the PlayStation 4. And that's where my experience comes out from. I have only ever played a lot of these games, and I was only lucky to play them through emulation, through preservation at the time. And of course, as time goes on and these video games get more and more lost on the internet even, and they're not preserved, then we have an entire new generation of gamers that will never be able to play classics that still hold through the test of time. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am out.